injector came in for the 7.3, and fired up the camera so we can O-ring this thing and go over the finer points of replacing the injector on a 7.3, and ran into a little snag. So here's our part for our early generation, early year. I open it up. That's what I got when I opened it. O-rings are already on it. These don't come with O-rings on them. They come in a bag with an instruction kit. So I was like, that's weird. All the work's done for me. So it's not in a bag. It's just in these little cushions here. And we got all this surface rust on here, O-ring, and it's quite clear that this injector has been returned. This is not a new reman like you would get when you buy it across country. Somebody has returned this, and then in turn it was sold to us. So I go to my parts guy and I said, look, something's up here, something's wrong. And he notices one more thing that I didn't even see yet. Check out the connector. So the whole thing's broken. I mean, it's just shattered right out of there, and the wires are exposed, and the plastic's all busted up, and yeah, so I was like, holy cow, man. Holy cow. All that is holy with cows. Gotta get another injector. So until then, it took a day to get this one. We're looking at another day to get another one. Alright, so we're back in business. We got our new replacement reman injector. And this is what it should look like. Same part number. So we're in a bag. Our connector's not broken. We've got a seal on here and a bag of O-rings that we have got to install. Those are instructions. If I'm re-O-ringing 8 of these, I'll just throw all these in a vat of oil, just a container of oil. But we're only doing the one, so I'll just lay them out. According to how they go. And let's see here. We got some oil. I'll just use this to lubricate it. These are pretty simple. So we got a steel cushion O-ring. Never fails. When I'm working on the bench, somebody starts pumping oil. Then we got a rubber cushion O-ring. And we got our actual O-ring that seals. The groove's rather large, so use that cushion O-ring. Keep this O-ring from getting beat up and torn. And it's actually got two. It's got a steel and a rubber. This O-ring here is pretty tough. It takes some doing to get it on here. So I just take a bent up pocket screwdriver. Helps give me a little leverage. They want you to kind of let this O-ring relax for a little bit. So that's why I go ahead and O-ring them now before I take the injector out. So that guy can kind of conform back to where it was, because you stretch it getting over that. And then we've got our copper seal. Just push that on with a socket. Get that nice and seated. I'll just lube these up. That injector's ready to go in the hurl. Now let's take the old one out. Alright. This injector, I'm only pulling the one out, and this valve cover's in bad shape. I'll show you in a minute. Because doesn't want to replace it, he just wants to replace that one injector. No glow plugs or anything else. Now there is the thorough way to do this job and the flat rate way to do it. The thorough way would be to drain the fuel out of the head and to drain the oil out of this rail here. We're going to do it the flat rate way. So basically what we're going to do is we're going to pop that injector out and then pop the new injector in as fast as we possibly can. This motor's at an angle. It'd be better if it was a front injector, but it's at the rear one. So when we pop it out, all this oil in this rail is going to want to drain down into the cylinder. So we're going to I'm going to have the new one ready to go, pop that one out, pop the new one back in, and tighten it down. So we get as little spillage as possible. Pull the glow plug out, spin the motor over, get the crud out of the cylinder, and then reassemble it. So I hope that I don't knock you guys over in the process. I got you right here in the action. So let's get to it. So we'll go ahead and pop the glow plug back out. Let's get it out of the way. Disconnect the injector. I think I'm going to just pop this harness right out of here. Even though I'm not replacing it, I don't want it to get broken. It's pretty rough on here when you're prying with a pry bar. Pop the spill spout out. If you're ever running this engine with a valve cover off, make sure the spill spout is on the injector. You will have a king size mess. The oil that's after it's been used by the injector and it spits it out, goes straight up. Straight out, excuse me, and the spill spout rediverts it down. So we'll just shoot across that way. Be a real mess. Now we'll take the bottom injector bolt loose. It's got two holding in, one right there, one down here. There's a whole set of tools to take these out with, but they're really hokey. They don't work very well. So we're going to use proper. And these are the plugs that drain the oil out of the grill, which we don't need to worry about because we're going to do that. So throw my old injector in here, get my new injector ready. Now in the midst of all this organized chaos, as I pop the old injector out, I'm just going to make sure that it has the copper washer still attached to it, because we don't want to double washer this thing. So this just slides up off of this shouldered bolt, like so. Just give her a push. This one I took the valve cover yet, so pop this out of here. Make sure it's got the washer on it. It does. Take the new one, put it down in here, put it there. That one's kind of hard to get to. Just got to get into that shoulder. I'll just put our bolt back in. And torque it. We're going to torque it to 120 inch-pounds. While I'm in here, I'm going to retorque all the injectors, because they do have a tendency to loosen up. See how loose that one was? Spill spout on our new injector. Torque it to 105 inch-pounds. And we don't need to worry about those. We don't need to retorque those. So the next step is to blow the oil out of this hole. So let's do that. Now this is pretty violent, so I like to put the valve cover back on with a bolt. Because it's really nasty when that oil comes flying out of there. I don't like to spin them with a key, because these engines start really fast. You're probably thinking that these 4 injectors aren't plugged in, but these trucks will start and run on 4 cylinders all day. So I'm going back to my remote starter button. Let's give her a spin. I'm going to kind of hold you guys. Alright, we're clear. So now I'm going to reassemble this thing. Let me show you a couple things though. This thing, all right, see it's normal here. We'll get over to here. See, it's all bubbled up and just melted. And if you look down in, that's where the number 1 glow plug is. If you look down in here, you can see that first terminal's burnt. I mean, it's just, you know, really burnt. So this thing needs a valve cover gasket and that harness. Now I took and let me set this back down. I went ahead and unplugged. Yeah, I took it off obviously. I went and unplugged it, and it's not tremendously bad right there, but it's burnt. But one thing you gotta watch out for is this can take out the ground signal for the number 1 injector. So so it goes number 1 glow plug, number 1 injector, power to both injectors, number 3 injector, and number 3 glow plug, and on down the line. So that terminal looks good, the second terminal looks good. But I did have some trouble unplugging the injector, so I'm gonna pop the valve cover back off and look at the injector with a mirror, make sure it looks okay. The harness looked okay. Yeah, the harness doesn't look too bad, but it was difficult to unplug. So I'll check, make sure that's okay. I'm gonna reassemble it, then we're gonna start it up and see how it runs. I don't know if you're gonna be able to see this or not. No ring in there. It's like a gasket, totally unnecessary. So that one does not have a gasket. That one does have a gasket, and then obviously that one doesn't. But this one's a little easier to see if I'm not blinding you. It's hard for me to hold my handheld light and camera at the same time. So I'll pop these 2 gaskets out of here, these 2 little seals, throw them in the trash. And then that glow plug right there is drawing too much power. And that's what burned up that harness. Luckily the glow plugs don't work anymore. This model's relay's crapped out. Or I would probably leave it unplugged, keep from doing any more damage, but it's not working, so I don't have to worry about it. Alright, so let's reassemble. Alright, we're ready to start this thing up. I've got the lab scope hooked back up to it so we can look at some numbers again. And the other day, I'm going to go ahead and say this all right now because this thing's really loud and I'm not going to shut it back off. The other day, whatever day it was, yesterday, day before, I can't remember now, the number 7 injector current was down. And the reason I knew it was number 7 is because we had done a contribution test with NGS. So if for some reason we couldn't run a test, we can simply ID the cylinder by looking at the cam output. The cylinder identification, or CID, not to be confused with cubic inches of displacement. So let's fire it up, let's look at the current, and then let's look at our camshaft. Got the air cleaner out of this thing, so I don't want any rags anywhere near this thing, or they will get sucked in there. There's our amp draw, and we're looking good. It's looking good all the way across the board there. CMP, they don't tell us which one is signal, but you can figure it out. So this is 5-volt ref. This is signal return, but this CMP's got its own dedicated signal return all by its lonesome. So this guy here is our signal. Okay, the biggest thing we need to know, there's our cam signal, is the firing order. Now this is going to be difficult to see. I don't know what's going to happen with this. I may take a screenshot of this and then talk about it with a voiceover. But real briefly, every time there's vanes and spokes on the cam gear. It's just a piece that bolts to the front of the cam gear. And every spoke is 15 degrees of crank rotation, except for one is a real narrow spoke and one's a real wide spoke. Now, every time that the spoke goes in front of the CMP sensor, it sends a 12-volt signal. So up here is a spoke. And every time a window comes into play, it sends a 0-volt signal. When we get to the narrow one, which is right here, it indicates cylinder number 1. And then when we get to the wide one, which is right here, that indicates cylinder number 4. And then we can determine through the firing order which cylinder is firing. Now what I'm going to do is simply I don't have a injector cancel box, so this will be a lot easier. But I'm just going to simply back probe a pin. Alright, got an injector disabled. Let's start it up. Let's see which one we're missing here. Alright, here's our number 1 identifier. And we're missing this injector here. Alright, here's our number 4 identifier. And we'll come back over to number 1 we're missing. So let's count them off. So we start with cylinder number 1 here. And we're going to be missing 1, so that's cylinder 1, injector 1, excuse me. So that would be number 2, number 7, number 3. Here's our number 4. So number 4, number 5, number 6, number 8. So if you look here, that's number 1 CID. That's number 4 CID. This is our missing injector here, which is number 1. 100% sure it's number 1. Each gap is 15 degrees. One crankshaft revolution is from here to here. That's half a cam revolution. So from here to our missing cylinder, so we're going 1, 2, on the 3rd window we're firing the injector. So 1, 2, 3. That's 45 degrees of crankshaft revolution. That number 1 is identifying to get ready to fire the number 1 injector, because this would make this the number 8 injector. Now if we come over here to number 4, let's see, 1, 2, 7, 3, 4. come over to the number 4 window, then that's the number 4 injector in the firing order. So we got 1, 7, 3, 2, 1, 2, 7, 3, 4, on and on, back around to 8. But yeah, so that's number 1. It's on at number 1. It's firing number 1. Come over here, it tells us number 4, fires number 4. So I don't know if you heard this thing running, but it runs really well now. I haven't even driven it. I'm gonna go drive it, make sure there's no air in the oil reel, because we had that apart, and get a little bit of air in there. And I'm gonna button it up and call it done. We're all back together. Go for real. Oh, we left a pile of smoke in the back there. It looks like a lot of fun. Let's slow her down. Let's pull off the road here. Take off again. See if it smokes again. Put you on this mirror. Pretty nice, huh? Got a lot of oil in that cylinder to make its way into the exhaust pipe. So just got to burn it off and it'll be fine. So I'll drive a little more and we'll get back to the shop, make sure it doesn't have any codes in it, no leaks. We'll ship it. Got a 7-3 block here. We're at the school, and we're going to look at a relationship of these parts in relation to the scope we're looking at, the patterns we're looking at. Unfortunately, this block is bare, so we got to put some parts back in it. Here's all the parts that go to it. So we're going to stuff the camshaft back in it, the crankshaft, and then we'll put 2 rods in it. So we're going to put the number 1 power pack and the number 4 power pack in it, and then we'll take a look at the relationship. Are this thing, and it's going to want to walk out of here. Still lined up. So here's your spokes, if you will. There's your window. When you see a spoke, you're going to read 12 volts. When you see a window, you're going to read 0 volts. So that's how we had that nice squared off pattern. And then we come up to here, and this represents number 1 cylinder because it's a real tiny little spoke. And then when we come all the way over to here, this represents number 4 because it's a really wide spoke. Don't have any bolts for this. We're hitting our other, but for our purpose will be close enough. I don't know if you can see it's propped up on that other mount we got on there. I'm going to zoom you in. Roll the engine over. Alright. Get my head out of the way. You can see that? That's the little window. Keep calling it a window. We call it a spoke. Let's call it a spoke. So there's a small spoke. And it may not look dead center, but it is. It's a little off the way I've got you sitting up here. Okay, and once that passes, so the cam sensor bolts here, it sits here. Our number 8 injector is fired about right there. Alright, if you look at our piston, and do the math, it is, so there's number 1, I guess it's zoomed in really good. There's cylinder 1, 3, 5, and 7. The piston is mathematically is 45 degrees below. The crank is 45 degrees from bringing the piston to top dead center to fire. The injector fires around 8 degrees. So let's bring the piston around and we'll see. So we should see 2 more spokes coming by our cam sensor here to bring our piston in line to be for the injector to be fired. That's 1, 2. Alright, so there's number 1 coming up on top dead center. And we have moved and we have rotated the camshaft 2 spokes. So if we get a 3rd spoke, our piston is now at top dead center. Now that's entirely too late to fire the injector. So we're going to fire the injector just a little bit before that. And we are, if you look at the crankshaft, so here's our crank center line right here. Alright, and if you look in there, I mean we're at dead center, top dead center, right on the money. So we're going to fire our injector just a smidge, not a lot. I mean, I'm talking, you know, just a couple of degrees. We're going to fire just a smidge before we get to that point. So number 4 is top dead center, but it is 180 out. We're not going to fire number 4 right now. So let's roll her on around till we see the fat window vane. thing is not happy. So there's our fat vein and our piston for number 4 is coming out ready to be ignited. And number 1, as you can see there, is in the same spot, but it's 180 out. So we're not going to fire number 1 right now. We're looking at the small spoke right there. The camshaft position sensor has noted that that is the small spoke, and it tells the IDM that we're coming up ready to fire number 1. That does not signify that number 1 is timed at top dead center by any means. To say that the small spoke represents the number 1 cylinder, it does represent it, but it doesn't represent it in a way saying that it's a top dead center. All it's saying is, here comes the number 1 piston, get ready to fire the number 1 injector next. Same way with the wide spoke. It's representing number 4, get ready to fire number 4. So when we looked at the lab scope data, we're back to if we for some reason all we have is a lab scope and we're trying to figure out which cylinder is running bad, we can do it simply by knowing a little bit how it operates and knowing the firing order. So looking at our lab scope, when we see that small spoke, the representation, which is a very small little square wave on the screen denoting 12 volts, that represents that number 1 cylinder is coming around. When I originally brought up the lab scope, I just threw an amp. I already knew which cylinder was a problem. Majority of scan tools allow you to do a cylinder contribution test. But I'd said right before we started that the older 7.3 Power Strokes were much easier to work on than the newer ones as far as cylinder problems go, because all the injectors are fired the same way. They all have they all have the same characteristics. And then for some stupid reason with customer satisfaction, they redesigned it, and number 8 cylinder was called a long lead or a cackle injector. Because number 8's right there, theoretically right there at your driver foot. So they want to make it quieter, whatever, just silly. And it always fails a test. It always flagged the test. If you look at the contribution on the PID data, it flags it, fails it every time just because of the way it's designed. It's a pain in the neck. Lab scope would help determine if that's the actual issue or not. But on these old ones, I was able to do a contribution test. Number 7 failed or flagged. And then when I threw an amp clamp around the injection circuit, power circuit, and saw the bad, that bad waveform for an injector, I knew it was number 7. I didn't have to worry about it because I already knew which one I was looking for. Problem is, if you couldn't do that test and you looked at that waveform, you would have no idea which injector is which. Get a lot of people coming around talking to me. See if I can get through this in one take. Let's see, where were we? Let's see. I already knew where number 7 cylinder was, and in that line of injectors that were being fired. And then, I was just checking the lab scope, the data to make sure that the IDM could actually physically fire that injector, which it was. It was sending everything it needed to the injector. The injector just wasn't doing its job. It was pretty easy to figure out, especially when I had others to compare it to. It's no big deal. If it was a 1-cylinder engine, it might be another story. But if we couldn't do that, all we had was a lab scope. I threw the other trace up from the camshaft position sensor, and then all we needed to know, first of all, we needed to know where number 1 falls. Once we know where number 1 falls, then the only second thing we need to know is the firing order. And then you can easily spot any injector that's missing or having a problem. You know exactly where to go. Because I mean, let's say you thought it was number 7, but it was actually number 8. You put a number 7 injector in it, doesn't fix it. And then you realize, oh man, it was number 8. Now you got to take the other side apart, plus the first side you took apart to get the injector out to move it. Because it's a good injector. You need to move it to the actual hole it's supposed to be in to begin with. So we looked at the trace, and the small spoke that came up represents number 1 cylinder coming up. All right, it's around 45 degrees of crankshaft rotation. I deep-ended the number 1 injector just to show the relationship. And by deep-ending the number 1 injector on the engine that was running properly after we'd repaired it, we verified that when the small spoke comes up, number 1 is on its way, and right at 45 degrees, there are 3, not quite 3 spokes. Number 1 is fired. Boom. All right. In our case, it was missing. And then we go through the firing order: 1, 2, 7, 3, whatever it was. I don't remember now. So that's it. If you, for some reason, you have a lap scope but nothing else, and you got a bad running 7.3 power stroke, you can put a trace on the CMP sensor and put an amp clamp on the injector power circuit, and then identify a injector problem if there is one. If it's a power problem on the engine, you have to do a compression test, but that'll at least rule out your injection system. It'd be very odd if you had a lab scope and nothing else, though. I mean, it can happen. You never know. And if you just want to play with it, if you have everything else in a lab scope, let's say the cylinder contribution test wouldn't work. Let's say you can't get it up to 170 degrees, and you've tried jumping out the oil temperature sensor with a resistor, and it just still will not enter the test. You could go right for the lab scope and help sort it out. Or you just put 8 injectors in it, and an IDM, and a harness, and whatever else could be at fault. I'm getting long-winded. This is going to make the video too long. We're going to wrap it up. The truck is done. It's great. It's happy. The customer did want to address the glow plug issues, and I've got to get him a quote, and we're going to get him back in before wintertime comes. And because he drives it. It's like a brand new truck to him. I mean, it's a 95 with 300-something thousand miles, and he drives it every day like it's, just drove it off the lot. So it's crazy. So he wants to keep it going, and we'll get that going for him. Maybe I'll make a video of that if I'm still at the dealership, when that time comes. But thanks for tuning in. I hope you enjoyed seeing this old beast, and a couple of different ways to look at it, and ways to work on it, and try to rule stuff out without guessing. And until next time, thank you for watching.